Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the book club live. I think this is June's book, if I'm right, that we're reviewing. I think I couldn't make it at the end of June, so we're doing it today. So hopefully everybody has read the book. I see Helen is in the chat and she says she still has to read the book. There will be spoilers in this live stream, Helen. So if you don't want to know what happens, you might want to watch it on the replay, but it's nice to have you here. So I am joined today by Deb, as usual. She is a regular guest. We usually have Maureen as well, but Maureen couldn't make it today. So Maureen, we will miss you today. I always
having a nice holiday, Maureen.
Hopefully, yeah. I always say if anybody wants to join live on camera, they're very welcome to. I can have up to 6 people on here. And so far, only Deb and Maureen have put their hands up. I think everybody else is scared.
Don't be scared.
So yeah, this month's book was Her Fearful Symmetry by Audrey Niffenegger, which always sounds like a Harry Potter character. Wasn't there something, a little creature called something like that?
I don't know.
In that one or in Fantastic Beasts. But I digress. So, Her Fearful Symmetry. Basically, it's about a woman called Elspeth who dies and leaves her flat to her twin nieces, Julia and Valentina, who live in America, and I think they're only around 20, and they come to live in the flat. And Elspeth's twin sister, Edie, lives in America with her husband, Jack. And it's basically a ghost story. Would you say it is a ghost story?
I would absolutely say it's a ghost story.
Yes.
That'd be my first description of it, ghost story.
It is not what I expected at all.
I had no expectations. I had no idea what to expect.
I haven't read any of Audrey Niffenegger's books.
No, I know she wrote The Time Traveller's Wife, but I haven't read that.
No, I haven't. So there's also some other characters living in this house. It's got three flats in this house, which is next to Highgate Cemetery. And on the top floor is Martin and Marika. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, Marika, yeah.
Yeah, and Martin has quite severe OCD. And on the bottom floor Robert lives?
Yeah, I think Robert lives underneath, so there must be Elspeth's flat, then Martin above and Robert below. Yeah.
Yeah, and Robert was Elspeth's lover. Now, when I first read the blurb on the back, I thought Elspeth was about 60, 70 years old, but she was actually only in her 40s.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at that because it seemed like it was an elderly aunt that left the flat to the guy. It wasn't that old, actually, which I suppose makes sense if she was, well...
Yeah, and Robert was about 10 years
in terms of how old they are, yeah.
So I'm just going to go into the chat. So like I said, Helen says she still has to read the book, but she has it on her shelf somewhere. Get it off the shelf, Helen. Diane, hi Diane. Hi Leslie. Leslie would like to chat live. I'm not sure how to give you the link now. Hang on, I'll just see if I can share this link. Oh, that's a referral link. Invite
link, no.
Invite guest. Right, I'm going to copy the link. I'm going to put the link in the comments. So if you would like to join in, as long as you've got a camera and a microphone, you can. So there, I've put the link in. Ricky says, hi, just jumping in to say I'm loving the book but haven't finished it yet, so I'm going to love you and leave you for now. I can tell you from what I have read, I would give it at least a 4.
Oh, what would you give it, Karen? Did you enjoy it?
Well, I thought about this, and all the way through the book, I'm thinking, I don't really like this. And I was quite, I was waiting for kind of all of the stories to come together, and I'm thinking this is rubbish. This is rubbish. But actually, by the time I got to the end of the book, I really enjoyed it. So I think I would give it a 4-star.
Oh.
What would you give it, Deb?
Well, I'm a bit. Well, when I was reading it, I agree with you. I felt like it was a bit desperate, like because I didn't. Yeah, although they were neighbours, and I guess they did have a part to play with in the story. Like, yeah, it was just like because there was obviously Martin, and they had a bit of his story with Marika, and he was, he had terrible OCD, so he couldn't. Is it OCD where you couldn't leave the flat,
Yeah,
or is that called OCD, or
I think it
whatever?
is CD.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he couldn't leave the flat. And then there were also the people who worked in the cemetery, in Highgate Cemetery, because Robert and Elspeth both worked in Highgate Cemetery. That's where they met. And there were people who worked within there as well. There were some bits of their story too. And also, I enjoyed the story. I found it very atmospheric. I thought the atmosphere was fantastic.
yeah.
And I did enjoy the story. It was a different sort of a story, wasn't it? But I didn't really like any of the characters.
No, and I know what you mean. So if anybody doesn't know and doesn't mind hearing spoilers who are listening, Elspeth dies at the beginning, obviously, and becomes a ghost, basically, who is stuck in her flat. She can't leave the flat. And it's quite a strange kind of, because some of the chapters are told from Elspeth's perspective as a ghost. And at first she's just kind of like this mist. And then she's able to sort of fully form herself and push things around. But then there was a bit where she could make herself small and go to sleep in her desk drawer.
I know. I guess it's like magical realism, isn't it? Or magical unrealism. I don't know what you'd call it in literary terms. But like she couldn't. There was all sorts going on. Yeah, she was a ghost. What I found out was quite interesting because the character of Elspeth, like if somebody dies, I always imagine like if a ghost dies, because whenever you hear of ghosts, they're just like wafting around in a nightie, isn't it? But Elspeth, like, she had goals. She wanted to change things, and she did. And I thought that was quite an interesting take on ghosts.
And she could change clothes as well.
Yeah. So weird.
She hovered above people, and
yeah.
So when Julia and Valentina turn up at the flat, I thought they were a strange pair as well. I don't know any twins, and I'm obviously not a twin myself, so I couldn't relate to that. But Julia was the more dominant twin, and Valentina kind of went along with everything she wanted. They did everything together. They dressed the same. When Julia wanted to leave school, Valentina left with her. Julia even called her the mouse.
Yeah.
Quite a downtrodden character, wasn't she, Valentina?
Well, yeah, you'd say that, but I was, I think I've mentioned before that one of my grandson's favourite books is The Gruffalo. And I always think, and actually my daughter calls my granddaughter sometimes Little Brown Mouse. And I feel like sometimes that little brown mouse is actually quite a tough character.
Yeah.
It's not just a downtrodden character. It might be used like to disparage her. But actually, I think that mice can be courageous. The mouse in the Gruffalo is courageous. It's brave. It manages to talk its way out of situations. And I think that, and was she a bit more like that actually when you find out later in the book, she is a bit more like that. She was a bit tougher than you give her credit for in the beginning.
Yeah. So Robert, who lives on the ground floor, was Elspeth's lover. So when Julia and Valentina come over, he doesn't even introduce himself for weeks, does he? He follows around, kind of like a stalker, and doesn't introduce himself. But then he ends up having a romantic relationship with Valentina.
Yeah.
Who looks very like Elspeth, which is
that's a bit creepy, isn't it?
That was
a bit creepy.
It was. I'm just going into the chat. Christine says she wasn't expecting to like this book, but she really enjoyed it. Diane said she really enjoyed it too. 4 stars. Hi, Claire. Linda says it's definitely a unique read. I would definitely agree with that. I've never read it.
Yeah.
Linda Orm says, hi, read the book eventually, bought a copy, but my eyes wouldn't let me read it, so listened on Audible, but it was abridged. 4 stars. Well, it's funny you should say that, Linda, because I got my copy from the library in its large print.
Oh.
Almost read that without me specs on. It made it so much easier to read. Leslie says, the link, it says she's got to join up, maybe next time. You have to join? Did you have to join, Deb? I can't remember.
I don't know. I just typed it into the search bar and got straight in.
Right, we'll definitely get you on for next time, Leslie. We'll get you sorted out. Claire says the twins are definitely strange. And Leslie says she loved the fact that the only differences between the twins were their suitcases. Yeah, well, didn't one of them really love pink?
Yeah, they did dress differently. And one of them was like very into wearing Elspeth's old clothes, which everything in the apartment, in the flat, the Highgate flat, was all the same as when there's nothing had changed since she left.
Yeah.
And like they just went along with it. And I know that as a stipulation of the will was like nothing could be changed. The parents weren't allowed there, not even for a visit, basically. Or were they allowed for a visit, but not to stay? I can't remember now. It's a while since I read it.
Go into the flat, were they? They could
No.
come up, but they weren't allowed to go into the flat. Which that the storyline about Elspeth and Edie, her twin, they hadn't spoken for, was it 20 years? They hadn't spoken or something like that. That storyline took quite a while to unfold.
Yeah. But I guessed that from the get-go.
Really? And I was completely confused by that storyline. When it got to the end, that it turned out that Elspeth and Edie had swapped places, and the twins, the babies, were actually...
They were actually who we think is Elspeth, but is actually Edie.
Yeah, I found that.
It was actually, they were Elspeth's children, and Elspeth was still alive, but she was pretending to be Edie.
Right. So were the twins?
No. They were Edie's children, but she was pretending to be Elspeth. So they weren't brought up with the mother. They were brought up by the aunt, but they thought that they were being brought up by the mother. But the aunt had left with the Jack, who was the original boyfriend of who you thought was Elspeth. That's very convoluted. That doesn't even make sense in my own mind.
I was trying to explain it to someone. I don't even know myself what was going on there. But even I thought that storyline was it didn't really add anything.
No, but I kind of gathered that because I was like, why did they? I just felt like it was very like why didn't they tell anybody apart from to move the story along? I guess, but it didn't really move the story along.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Elspeth, Edie, who was pretending to be Elspeth, was the one that married Jack. And Edie, who had lived with Jack for 20 years, was really Elspeth. But didn't Jack hate her at the beginning? When they first met, didn't he not like her?
No, he didn't like. I thought he was with the person who he did like. But he thought it was the person he didn't like. Or something. I don't know. I think I read this book in early May, so I genuinely can't remember the whole story of it.
This is why I read it the week before the live, because I would forget. Claire says, I wish my copy had been large print. Mine was regular print, but I read every word. That's good. Leslie says, I love the fact that we'll read that bit. Linda says, maybe you need to be a twin to understand the relationships between the two sets of women, most probably. Christine says,
I haven't even got a sister. Have you got a sister, Karen?
I have, but we're not close.
Yeah, well, I don't even have a sister, so I have no idea what it's like to have a close female relative.
No,
I've got 2 brothers, and yeah, nothing like that ever happened.
I think it explained why Elspeth left the flat to the twins. Yeah, that definitely, yeah, that did explain that. So moving the story on a little bit, Valentina.
Yes, Leslie, they were twins. Edie and Elspeth were twins.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Valentina was able to communicate with the ghost, Elspeth, halfway through the book. So she was kind of chatting away to her via a Ouija board kind of thing. And this kitten turns up. This nice little fluffy white kitten turns up. And Valentina manages to coax the kitten into the flat. It's a stray kitten, apparently. And she keeps the kitten. But then Elspeth she reaches for the kitten and her hand obviously goes through, but manages to grab onto the kitten's soul and drags it out. So the kitten's lying dead on the floor, and she's holding this ghost kitten, struggling. And eventually she puts the ghost kitten back into its body, so the kitten's alive again. But then
that's actually a very important part of the plot, because when that happens, that you know what can happen.
Yes. So, but this happens again where she manages to take the soul out of the kitten, but the kitten gets away and she can't put it back in, so the kitten's dead. Basically, I thought, poor kitten. I mean, come on.
I know.
But it was actually just setting it up for the fact that later in the book, Valentina wants to get away from her twin Julia, who she feels is very controlling, that she thinks Elspeth can do the same to her. She can take her soul out of her body, so she'll look dead. They're going to put her in a coffin in the tomb in Highgate Cemetery with loads of ice in, so she doesn't decay. And then they'll put the soul back into the body, and Robert will take it away somewhere. So Julia thinks her sister's dead and Valentina can escape.
Yeah.
Have I said that right?
Yeah, I think that's basically the gist of it. That's what the plan was, yeah.
And a completely mad storyline. I think this is why I struggled with deciding whether I liked this book, because there was so many different parts to it. And so many strange ideas.
I know it was.
I wasn't quite sure how it was all going to fit together.
No.
Did anybody struggle with the fact that you killed the kitten?
I did. I thought, well, it's only a poor little kitten, isn't it? I felt sorry for the kitten.
Because they didn't need to kill the kitten, did they?
No.
Yeah.
I felt sorry for it.
Christine says she has 4 sisters. Wow.
Whoa.
4 sisters.
Wow.
I bet that was fun. Claire says it's very confusing. Leslie's got 2 sisters. Leslie says the kitten's take was bizarre. It was.
I think there was a lot of bizarreness in the book on the whole.
Yeah. So, is there anything you want to say about the book, Deb?
One thing that I did think when I was reading the book is, like, I'd really like to go to Highgate Cemetery. I think that sounds really interesting. I've never been there, and I think it sounds like somewhere I'd really enjoy going to. So I would like to do that. And I just think that, the flat must have must be worth a fortune, Like, I was just thinking, they were like living like, poor little people who had no money, and they were living in a Highgate, in the flat in an area that must have been worth quite a lot of money. And also, I felt the whole relationship between Martin and Marika, obviously, in the book, she left him because she couldn't deal with his worsening OCD or whatever it was, and so she left and she moved back to Amsterdam because that's where she came from. And then he knew Robert obviously because they were neighbours and he'd known Elspeth and he'd quite got on with her. And then he made friends with Julia.
Yeah.
It was Julia he made friends with. And then it got to the point where he felt like he could travel. I can't remember why, but he got to the point where he could travel, and he left his flat and he went to Amsterdam, and then his son moved into the flat. Or did he?
I think his son Theo came to clear the flat out and
Oh,
get
he
it
came
ready.
to clear the flat out. Okay,
Yeah.
he knew his son was involved in some
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
But Martin had really bad. I mean, I read somewhere. I think I read a blurb somewhere with it was OCD,
Okay.
and he had it really bad.
He
I mean,
did.
he used to. He could only go into rooms right foot forward or something, and sideways, and
Yeah, and his
he
house was a stank of bleach because he was always bleaching things, like bleaching.
Yeah, I felt sorry for him, but I also felt sorry for his wife, Marika, because that must be horrendous to live with that.
Yeah.
But Julia eventually started giving him tablets to medication that would help his condition, but she told him they were vitamins. But apparently Martin knew all along they weren't vitamins, which was a bit weird.
Yeah. But he's also said that he knew that he had been taken whatever it was that she was giving him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I wasn't quite sure how the story of Martin and Marika fitted in with the rest of it. But
No.
I was reading on Goodreads or something I was reading,
Yeah.
and they said the kind of theme of the book was being trapped. And if you think about it, they were all trapped. Elspeth was trapped as a ghost in the flat. Valentina was trapped as a twin because Julia was controlling. Martin was trapped because he had OCD. Marika felt trapped because she was married to Martin. So that did make sense when I read
And
that.
also Julia was also trapped because she felt a sense of responsibility to Valentina, even though that she was overbearing and Valentina couldn't stand it. She did feel that sense of responsibility towards her, and the parents were trapped because they were living a lie.
Yeah, yeah,
So that makes a lot of sense, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just go back to the comments. Linda Tong, I'd like to know what everyone thought of the ending. It left me a little unsatisfied and wondering why the author chose to end it that way. So at the end,
It's going to have to be a big spoiler.
instead of putting Valentina's soul back into Valentina's body, Elspeth decided to put her own soul back into Valentina's body and carry on a relationship with Robert. And Robert, obviously, he couldn't cope with that. And he ends up leaving her eventually at the end. And Valentina ends up managing to get out of the flat with the ghost kitten by making herself so small that could fit into, was it Julia's mouth?
I can't remember. I know that they did leave the flat.
Was it into Julia's mouth, and she carried them out, and then Valentina and the ghost kitten met all the other ghosts, and they flew away.
Yeah, I quite liked that bit actually.
Yeah, I did as well. I would have liked to know a little bit more from Robert towards the end, because it was more from Elspeth's perspective.
But she said that, didn't he leave her a letter or something, or he rang her and he said that he told her why he was leaving because she was so controlling and he couldn't cope with what she was like. But did she have a baby or another baby or something in the end?
Yes, she did, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, all very strange. So in a way, I was satisfied with the ending. But I think it took us a few days after I'd finished the book, mulling it all over in my head, to think, yes, I did enjoy the book and I was okay with the ending. Christine says, I think the kitten dying was to show that Valentina might not pull through once Elspeth took her soul. Yeah, that's a good point, Christine. And she didn't, did she?
Oh,
In fact, I guessed all along, or from quite early on, that Elspeth was going to take Valentina's body. I did kind of think that was going to happen.
yeah.
Leslie says, what about the tours around Highgate Cemetery? I'd like to go on one of those. I think that would be very
Me too. I didn't even
interesting.
know they did tours. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Well, they did in the book, so I don't know if,
Oh, yeah, but I didn't know if that was just because
yeah,
of the story. Yeah.
maybe we should look that up.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Maybe we could all meet in London and like go on a tour around Highgate Cemetery. That would be so super fun.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Claire says, I almost stopped reading over the kitten episode. It appalled and repulsed me.
Mm,
Yeah, I wasn't sure that was absolutely necessary to the story. I understood why they took the soul out of the kitten, but they could have put it back, unless it was because Valentina was quite attached to the kitten, wasn't she? So in
yeah.
the end, when she was a ghost, I guess she had the kitten ghost to be a friend.
And the thing is, I suppose if you're an author and if you want to come up with this scenario and you think of what little animal you could use in that scenario, like what could you use? You couldn't use like a cockroach or a bat or a mouse because people would be like, oh, who cares? But
Yeah,
so you've got to have something, and also something that's not like, you don't generally have puppies wandering around feral, do you?
yeah,
So kittens, I guess that's the thing that works, sadly.
yeah. Linda says, in Martin's case, the drugs worked. They did. They did. I wonder if that would happen. I don't know. I can't remember what time scale that was over, that she was feeding him the medication, and whether it would actually work that quick.
It was a few months, I
Pretty
think.
bad. He went from not even being able to leave the flat to
Yeah.
go, to traveling to Amsterdam.
I think that was a bit of a weird thing in the book, because if he obviously he was more inclined to take them because his wife had left him and he wanted to see his wife, and I think, but when he said that he'd known that he was taking those drugs and not the vitamins.
Yeah,
And so maybe because Mariko was gone and he wanted to see her, he would continue taking those. Whereas I think maybe before she had still lived in London with him, and he wasn't interested in taking the drugs. So maybe he had more incentive to take them. Yeah,
yeah,
but it didn't seem to take that long actually in the grand scheme of things, did it?
yeah. But I still wasn't quite sure how Martin and Marika tied in with the story. That seemed like a kind of like a side thing.
I wonder why.
I suppose it was someone for Julia to talk to.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe it did like underscore that whole idea of being trapped, because I felt like when I was reading the book, I did feel like it seemed very oppressive. The whole story was a bit claustrophobic, isn't it? Because I felt like nobody could really even move. They couldn't really escape the flat. They couldn't, like, everybody was kind of trapped. Yes, I hadn't verbalized that in my own mind, but I did feel like it was very claustrophobic. And
Yeah.
maybe he was just used as, just another layer of that claustrophobic feeling.
Yeah. As soon as I read that thing where it says the theme was being trapped, that
Yeah.
made perfect sense, because they were all trapped.
Yeah.
Linda and Christine both say, yes, you can have guided and self-guided tours of Highgate.
Oh.
Interesting. Claire says she did a tour of Highgate Cemetery, but it was in 2001 when she was visiting my nieces in London. They weren't twins, were they, Claire? Linda says she's not left her flat for over 2 years. The drugs don't always work. Oh, no, Linda. So do you have a similar thing to what the character of Martin had? I mean, obviously you don't have to share if you don't want to, but that's awful. Leslie says they could have had an owl instead of a kitten.
Well, owls are pretty, like, I don't think they could have had a genteel owl flapping around a flat. How would an owl have got into their flat? How would they have lured an owl in? Like,
Yeah,
then there's like a mouse out the window.
maybe it would have made the story even more complicated.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe.
Christine says Julia's involvement with Martin turned her attention from Valentina. Yeah, it
Yes,
kind of gave
yes.
her somebody when Valentina was off with Robert all the time. I did think Robert was the most depressing, weak character. I thought he was such a wimp. Um,
I
he,
didn't see the attraction at all because obviously Elspeth was in love with him, and so was Valentina. And like,
yeah,
I just didn't get it really.
no,
He wasn't exactly like a hero, was he?
he didn't really seem to be in love with either of them, though, did he? I think it was
No.
a sexual attraction with
Mm,
Elspeth because she was an older woman, and I'm not sure what he saw in Valentina. Um,
yeah. And
but
like
I,
their host walking them around London whenever they went anywhere. He wouldn't knock on their door, but he was like following them hither and there around whenever they went there. It was weird.
very weird. Yeah, I'm just going to look at my notes to see if there was anything else I had written down. Do you think there's anything we've missed?
Well, I'll see. I'll look at my notes as well. I don't think I wrote very good notes, but
Yeah, I think the only other thing I thought was a bit was kind of squashed in was the Julia seemed to start developing a relationship with Theo, Martin's son, right at the end of the book. That kind of seemed a bit. Would that really happen? But then would the whole thing really happen? Probably not.
yeah, no, I don't think it would
Also,
happen.
would you ever have a ghost floating above your head?
Well, I do think I've got a ghost in this house. I joke. I joke. I don't think I've got a ghost in this house. But I did say that to my kids the other day. Something fell off and I said, "Oh, it's the ghost." And she was like, "Oh, have you got a ghost?"
But I mean, it's strange you say that because my nana used to wear a certain perfume, and
Mm.
every now and again, I can smell it. I can smell the scent of
Oh.
that perfume wafting past, and I'm thinking, yeah, she'll see what I'm doing.
Well, we can smell cigarette smoke, and we none of us smoke. We've never smoked in this house, and I smelt it. And then the other day, Caitlin, my daughter, was here, and she was like, "I can smell cigarette smoke." I thought, well, I said, "Oh, it's the ghost." And
Gonna
yeah,
freak yourself out now.
no, I'm not scared of ghosts. I don't. Well,
I wouldn't have said I was scared of them, but if I was confronted with one in front of us, I'm not sure what I would do.
well, it depends, isn't it? If I was like walking in the woods and like somebody appeared, or and I was like, if I don't know, I'd probably die on the spot and become a ghost myself.
Don't let them take their soul out.
Yeah. I
Leslie,
haven't written good notes. My notes are just like pros, atmospheric, cons. All the things we've been talking about were cons to me. Although I did enjoy it, ish. In hindsight, I enjoyed it.
yeah. Leslie says, is she right in thinking there was a gate leading from the house into the cemetery? Yes, I think
Yes.
there wasn't there? But they weren't supposed to use it at night.
I don't know. I think there was a gate from the garden into the cemetery because they could see it out the window. And Robert used to go through that gate to get to the cemetery.
Yeah.
Um,
Linda says they were all trapped throughout the book, but then found their freedoms at the end, I guess. Yeah, that was the theme. Linda Orm says she has a ghost cat. That's interesting, Linda. Is it a cat that you owned? Or a cat that lived with you? Leslie said, did Robert follow the twins around London? Yes, he did. Yeah, he was a bit of a weirdo.
Yeah.
I was going to say something then, I forgot what it was. Yeah, I really enjoyed the stories about Highgate Cemetery. Really enjoyed the stories where he was talking about how the Victorians were obsessed with death and how
I really enjoyed that bit too.
they were obsessed with being buried alive. And it wasn't that the main reason they put them in tombs rather than putting them underground. I thought that was quite fascinating.
Yeah,
And
I've been reading a very interesting, sorry to digress from this book, but I've been reading, I finished it now, I was reading a very interesting book called Dark River, and it's by somebody that I found that came up on my YouTube channel, and I saw a channel that came up on YouTube, and it was by this woman called Rosamund Bott, and she's an author, she's got a YouTube book channel, and but she's written this book called Dark River. And in this book, it's about the Thames, and it's all bits of history throughout about the Thames River. And I thought that was really interesting. That's why I think I'd like to go to Highgate Cemetery, because I think, and also in this book, Her Fearful Symmetry, is like how it, not cemetery, symmetry, how it expanded, isn't it? Because it was small, and then they like expanded it until it was huge, and that was for, they wanted to show off, really, didn't they? Did I get that right? They wanted to show off, and that was one of the ways they showed off. It was like, I guess it was their way of like going to space.
Yeah. It was definitely fascinating, that part.
Yeah.
Christine says Martin had a key to the gate but wasn't supposed to use it. Yeah, I think Robert had a key, didn't he? Yeah. Linda Orm says, yes, a cat that used to live with me. Is that a comfort to you, Linda? I often see, actually, I mean, we've had cats in this house as long as we've lived here, 34 years. I've still got a cat. But quite often I'll see a cat walk past us and I'll say, oh, that was Milo. She's a ginger cat. And she's not in the room.
So you've got a ghost cat too.
Because we did have another ginger cat. And I think he's still in the house.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. Linda says, I don't think the book was meant to be funny, but it was a bit at times. I do recall chuckling in a couple of places, but I can't remember what it was at now. Linda Tong says she's in the middle of reading another book with an unusual ghost theme called Daisy Cooper's Rules for Living by Tamsin Kelly. I've never heard of that.
No, I've never heard of it either.
I'm going to write that down, otherwise I'm going to forget. Tamsin Kelly. I don't think I've read many books that have ghosts in them. I think Kate Morton, one of the clockmaker's daughter, I think there was a ghost in that. But I don't recall many of them.
Oh, that one it wasn't a ghost, that one we read about the war. What was that one? A couple of months ago?
The Nightingale.
The Nightingale. Did they have ghosts in that? It wasn't a ghost, it was the devil, wasn't it? Or some sort of a demon. It wasn't a ghost, it was a demon or something.
That was that the one with the witches?
No, it was the one where remember there was an explosion in Canada and the nurse went to France to find her brother. What was that?
No, we haven't read that.
Yes,
was that the Warm Hand of Ghosts?
Yes, the Warm Hand of Ghosts, but it wasn't a ghost.
We haven't read that.
It wasn't Ghost, was it?
The Warm Hand of Ghosts. I haven't read that book. I've got it on my Kindle to read, but I haven't read it.
I've read that. I've read it. Sorry, people. That was the Warm Hand of Ghosts. I've read it. We haven't read it.
I need to read it now.
There kind of are ghosts in there.
Linda says it's Kylie. Tamsin Kylie. Kylie. Leslie says she's got 4 ghosts. 4 cats.
4 cats.
Or something.
4 sisters.
So how many stars would you give it, Deb?
Honestly, I probably would have only given it 3.5 maybe, but I've enjoyed this chat, so I'm going to give it 4.
Yeah, it took me a few days afterwards to think about it, because I talked about it to a couple of people and they said, did you enjoy it? And I'm like, I really don't know if I enjoyed it or not.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it. I thought some of the concepts, like this ghost floating around changing her clothes, and I thought that was quite a fun idea actually.
Yeah, I liked that. I thought that was funny, and like she was like bored and stuff, and she was like, "Oh, well, yeah, go back into the desk drawer."
But what would you want to be stuck like that? I don't think I would. No.
No.
Yeah. So next month's book, or this month's July's book, I'm lost track of the dates a little bit. July's book is The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton.
Oh, read it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this one because I like Kate Morton. I didn't choose this one for the poll. I think somebody else did, but that was the one that got the most votes. I'm not going to do
I
it.
chose it. Did I choose it? Maybe.
Did you choose it? You might have.
Maybe. Yeah.
We're not going to choose a book for August because I'm away a couple of times in August, and I don't think I'm going to get a chance to read anything specific for the end of the month. So I don't want to hold myself to it. So the next one after July for the live will be September. So we need to choose a book for September. So if anybody's got any suggestions for a book for the poll in September, let me know in the comments, either below this video when it goes up for the replay, or you can put them on the Facebook group, and then we'll get a poll up next week to choose one for that. Leslie's got 4 cats. 4 cats.
Ghost cats or living cats?
Cats. I think it was Linda who had the ghost
cat.
Yeah, Leslie's just got 4 live cats. I've only got 1 at the moment.
I've got 0 house cats, but I've got 3 feral cats that I feed.
All right. And a ghost that smokes.
And a ghost that smokes, or smoked, or just lurks around smelling, like maybe they smoked in the garden, I don't know, and they've just come in the house.
Christine says, The Forgotten Garden is a long book. I'll have to start reading now. Do you know, it is quite a thick book. I had a Waterstones voucher to spend, so this is what I bought with it. And I do like a thick book. I always go for the thick books on a bookshelf. I don't know why. I just feel like there's something to get your teeth into. But yeah, I'm going to have to get cracking with that as well, because it's like the 9th of July now. And I'll probably do the live for this right at the beginning of August. So I've got a bit of time to read it. So hopefully everybody could read it. And if anybody wants to, join in the live on camera, Deb's always very welcome. I love having Deb.
Thank you, Karen. That's kind of you to say.
Oh, I do. And hopefully Maureen can join, and anybody else who would like to. Deb actually, she put something in a chat we were having earlier today, and she looked at the Sainsbury's magazine with some book recommendations in there. So do you want to put those in the Facebook group?
I will do. I've got the magazine here, and just happened to have it on the table, and there's, I don't know, I'll put it in the Facebook group. I'll put those pictures I sent to you in the Facebook group so everybody can see them, or what books are that they've recommended in there, but I can't find it now. It'll take too long flicking through it. So I'll put them in the Facebook group, their book club recommendations.
Yeah.
Because some of them seemed quite okay when I looked at them. I thought, I wouldn't mind reading a few of those.
Yeah, there was a couple on. I thought, I'll put that on my list. I've got too many books on my list.
Well, me too. I've got a big pile that I haven't even started yet.
Has anybody read anything good in the last few weeks?
Well, I would recommend what I was just saying, The Dark River, and if you've got Kindle Unlimited, it's on Kindle. Kindle Unlimited, you don't pay for, so I read that. I enjoyed that actually. It was also a bit unusual, and because it's also time traveling. It's time traveling, so it's about somebody who lives in the present day, and how they meet this person, and then they do this quest where they go back and forward in time, and I found that really quite interesting. But then when I'd read the book, and then I saw that it was for ages 16 to 18, but it didn't strike me as a young adult novel or anything. So I found that quite interesting. That's
Sounds
Dark River by Rosamund Bott. I enjoyed that. That's what I've just finished that yesterday. A very quick read, that is.
Yeah. I don't think I haven't read that much this month actually. I read that one, Her Fearful Symmetry. I read a book by a guy who sent us a book that he'd written.
I read that too. The Lich in
Have you
the.
read it?
Yeah, I read that because I saw it on your thing and I thought I'll read that, and I got it and I read it.
And what did you think?
I actually, I think I felt the same as you in that I felt it was a pity that he didn't have it edited.
Yeah.
But, and not just for typos, grammar, I feel like he could have done with like a full edit. But I really liked the ideas. I really liked his writing, and I'm really interested to see what's happening next.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, Tim somebody, is it? Yeah.
Timothy Stormcrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's quite a way through writing the second one.
Okay.
He's made it bigger, but he did say that he can't afford an editor, so he's just having to go through it himself. And I think he would really benefit from an editor because it
That's
was a
what I like
little
to
bit
do.
jumbled in places. And even as I was reading it, I was thinking he could have wrote it in that way, or rearranged it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think that he could do with somebody professional to look over it.
yeah,
And I know that if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And maybe he'll make more money from the book, because I think that that was on Kindle Unlimited as well. That's why I read it on there. And yeah, you can't afford it, so you just got to put it
I
out if you can. And good
think
luck to him.
I think if you can get enough interest and traction from the reviews, from he's sending the book out to people, then
Mm.
maybe a publishing place might just pick it up, because I thought the I enjoyed the characters, I quite enjoyed the storyline,
Yeah,
and
me too.
I wanted to know what was going to happen next.
And what I liked about it were his, in the bits where he says elsewhere, and then he puts in a little bit of like a folklore tale.
Yeah,
I really liked those bits, and
yes, I did.
I liked the story in general, and I think that he should carry on writing them.
Yeah, definitely. Linda, wait a minute. Christine says, I'm reading The Missing Family by Tim Weaver. The Missing Family. I'm going to have a load more books on my list now. The Missing Family. And Linda Tong says, my hubby has just read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. Said the Prosecco was brilliant. The Prosecco? And possibly the best book he's read, so I'm giving that a go soon.
I haven't read The Goldfinch. I've read The Secret History by Donna Tartt, but I haven't read The Goldfinch. That's on my list of one of those books you have to read, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't quite understand the Prosecco was brilliant bit.
Oh, she said, sorry, typo, not Prosecco, the prose.
I'm thinking, did you get a free bottle of Prosecco with the book? What? Maybe you have to drink the Prosecco as you read it. The prose. Thank you for that. So I have heard of the Goldfinch.
Yeah.
The Goldfinch. Right. So if there's nothing else anybody wants to talk about, I think I will end the live there. Leslie says, I'd love to read something out of my comfort zone, perhaps fantasy. I read a fantasy book recently. I think Deb's read it as well. And it is The House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. So maybe if you want to go out of your comfort zone, Leslie, this might be for you. It is a really thick book, 800 and odd pages. And basically nothing much happens until the last 100 pages. But having said that, I enjoyed it. I wanted to read the next one. So, yeah. If you do read it, let us know what you think. So I'm going to end the live there. Thanks so much to Deb for joining us again. It's lovely to have you. And thank you to everybody in the chat. I really enjoy reading your comments, and it's nice to have a bit of to and fro with stuff as well, rather than just me sitting here talking at everybody. So thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next one. So bye.
Bye.
Bye.